Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and especially to Just Stop Oil, because this is really sort of what this video is really about. So let's get straight to it. So earlier today, I rejoined the Labour Party for the third time now. I'm a member of the party, so we'll just there's going to be reasons again. I'll come back to in another video about that. But today I wanted to discuss just one or two things about Just Stop Oil, because it was the very first thing I did once I rejoined the party, is that I got back in touch. I got in touch with Just Stop Oil, and I left an email explaining about what I thought about their organisation, what I thought about the way they did things, and what in general sort of like the criticisms I had about it. And that's kind of what I wanted to voice throughout this, because I know I wrote to them, like, it's nearly 8:15 at night now, and I wrote to them something roughly about 10.5 hours ago. So here, and again, maybe they just had a lot of people, writing to them, or the person manning the general inquiries was off that day. But here's sort of what I wanted to make public, and let's do it now. I'm going to go through the criticisms and that. Now, you've probably all seen it about activists wearing orange, and they hold up banners and they block central motorways, bypasses, roads. And you've probably also seen videos of workmen who literally are just trying to get to work, go about their business, or people trying to drop off their kids at school, minibus drivers, bus drivers, and basically they get attacked, they get drove into with cars, some people get in their faces and put their hands on them and stuff like that, and the police sort of just have to, again, they're free to carry out their democratic business and protest however they wish, and it's all the rest of it. And you've got to understand exactly a little bit that the democratic spirit of things about people's rights to protest are absolutely coming into play, which is, again, it's perfectly legal, it's perfectly above board and stuff like that. But again, with what we know about the Not My King protests of the coronation, the rules about protest and freedom to protest, they seem to be only whenever the government chooses to make up its mind about it. But again, that's something else entirely. Anyway, so through quite a lot of things and more videos to come, and you see many people get very vitriol about commenting about good that these people are being attacked, and good that these people they should be locked up, and all the rest of it. And you gotta really admire the spirit of the British public, because nothing quite drives them inroads when it comes to levels of toxicity. I'm dead serious about this. The British public have a very, very cocky way about how they want to portray themselves whenever it's convenient, whenever it's about anything that they don't like, even if they don't have any contact with it whatsoever, particularly Just Stop Oil. Whether it's them protesting at a snooker game, or the Chelsea Flower Show, or through national galleries and stuff like that, you sort of get the idea about what this is doing, and how their cause is frequently being talked about, and how it's now making the front page, it's garnering so much attention, and even people on Twitter, mostly Conservative MPs, who have no filter and have very unministerial language. Well, their colourful language literally speaks for itself. So if you get the opportunity to see what they've got to say, because some of the things they do have to say are very, very strong, and the sort of thing that I imagine people like Lindsay Hoyle, if he saw this be brought up, his jaw would hit the floor. And again, Lindsay Hoyle was one of the men I have a tremendous amount of respect for certainly trying to maintain any sort of order in this sort of country is like, well, it's like tortured Sisyphus. You simply cannot win. So at the beginning, I thought this was tremendous, because you know what, for better or worse, they are standing up for their cause, and you know what, it's working. Their cause is absolutely working. You know why it's working? Because what I said before about people, you know, highlighting their toxicity in comments and how they share it across Facebook and TikTok. It's the fact that it's getting around at all, and it's the fact that it's even being discussed in these circles. That, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly what is needed from them. It's a tactical maneuver, and I know, because I've had to, you know, those books over there are not just for displays. This is what's referred to as political terrorism. What they're doing is ostensibly that. It's not through military action. It's not through some hostile takeover. It's about driving a narrative, driving a cause, and making it the front page. That's what it's about. And it brings people's attention to it. You know what? Think about how many times people laugh to scorn at people like Greta Thunberg, and they talk down on her and her ideas because people did not take her seriously, and it's almost sort of like spawned this sort of really ingenious sort of subculture that, you know what, if you're not going to take her seriously and she was just one person, what about the thousands of people who are starting to realize that we can't have this going on, and it's simply a skirmishing maneuver in order to maintain the status quo by also secretly adjusting it so that we have more billionaires and so we can suppress thousands and millions of normal human beings, whilst at the same time the Earth's natural resources are starting to substantially be used, probably in exponential numbers than we'll come to associate with. I can probably safe to say, ladies and gentlemen, that the world we live in right now is not going to be the same world 50 years from now. I can guarantee that. People will have to rely on renewable forms of energy, or cleaner forms of energy, or maybe think nothing will be different, and we'll be having these same discussions in 50 years' time. But then what, ladies and gentlemen? By that point, I'll be 75 years old, and do you really think I'm going to live in the same sort of world with the same sort of people at that point in my life? It's probably likely not, but let's roll with this for 1 second. That nothing will happen or everything will continue as before. But as the old saying goes, one man's terrorism is another man's freedom fighter, and one man's villain is another man's hero. And you've heard me spoke a little bit about how I'm incredibly... I admire and actually really, really go for the spiritedness of what they're doing and what their cause is, and people don't like it, and they will throw any and all insults at just saying that these are only done by middle class people, and that these people, it's been done by people who have no job whatsoever. It's lib, and it's completely incorrect and false, because to begin with, on what basis do you know that these people are middle class from Just Stop Oil? Like, what evidence is there? Do you have like any proof? Do you know these people? What is it? Come on, I genuinely actually want to know what is it about them that makes you think they're middle class? People might think I'm middle class, but I'm working class. You know what? I work, and just because I speak with a different dialect, do you really think speaking a different dialect makes me middle class? And I've talked about the class nonsense many times before. So no, I personally I don't agree with that. And also, again, that these people are unemployed. Again, why do you think that? What basis have you got to say? And again, part of me likes to assess this could be assessed. These comments could be thrown about by people who are unemployed themselves. You know what? He who is without sin should cast the first stone. Like, is that what this is coming to? nondescript people who know they can absolutely get away with saying such horrible things against people who are actually doing something. It may not be the things we like, but you know what? Fair play, we should let them do it. It's their right, and we should learn to respect people like that. So you can see how their maneuvering is literally designed to piss off the exact sort of people. Because by doing it, it's brought attention to it. And now it's starting to create a racket. And it's not the sort of thing that just stops in the UK. It will continue in places like Germany and Italy and Switzerland and the US and Australia. It's not the sort of thing... I don't say it's going to change or fix things overnight, but if it was a discussion that wasn't being thrown about before, it certainly is now. With that being said, however, here is the U-turn. This is where I play devil's advocate. Because, in the first place, if I was in the back of an ambulance and I'd been like fatally wounded, and I was in the ambulance and they were, had the sirens going and they were racing against time to get me to hospital, and we were held up by Just Stop Oil. Now, I don't really need you guys to understand. I don't really need you guys to put too much thought or stock into this, because it's incredibly evident exactly what you could imagine this would be like. And bearing in mind, whether it's... You could easily throw it off by saying that it's highly unlikely that you'll be in the back of that ambulance, but somebody's got to be in the back of an ambulance. You know what I mean? Look at it that way. What if a paramedic was injured and they had to get them to hospital? Or, again, it could have been dozens of people in the back of one ambulance and they had to get a hospital. And again, what if I was holed up in this protest for traffic for 10 minutes? That 10 minutes could mean the difference between life and death. And you only need to consider, ladies and gentlemen, exactly what this could mean if I had, if not for me, but what if it was a friend of mine or a family relative of mine? Or it was somebody I knew really well and they were just... Or what if it was just nobody in particular? Does our level of sympathy or our level of empathy go more towards the idea of that sort of scenario? Or is it more deflected in apathy for the protesters? Now, it could be... Now, again, the likelihood is that maybe, in my mind anyway, that if I was a part of like the activists for Just Stop Oil, I would, and I saw an ambulance in the distance, I was trying to get through, I would tell people, we got to get off the road. There's an ambulance coming, come on, they've got to get to a hospital. That's what I would do, ladies and gentlemen, if I was in that situation. It's a question of morality, and there's only one of two choices. You either do or you do nothing. And that is one of those times where I would absolutely do. But at the same time, what about just for people just trying to get to work? I know fine well what their frustration must be like. I've been held up in traffic long enough to know for the fact that it's not particularly a great experience, but I don't, stew in my own rage whilst I'm in traffic. At the most, it's mildly inconvenient. At worst, well, no, it's never really been a worst case problem. That's just, it's not really been like that. But you can understand exactly the frustration, but you can also understand the frustration on the point of the protesters that nobody is actually going to listen to them, which is, at the end of the day, something that it could mean the difference, ladies and gentlemen. The Black Panthers would not have been heard of if they did not make stands and they didn't stand for something. You know what I mean? Nelson Mandela might have never faced prison if he didn't stand for what he believed in on college campus. And the further we go into this, you begin to sort of wonder, well, what would it take for Just Stop Oil to really get people? Because here's the thing about why I think it's the wrong maneuver, is because you hold up people in traffic, it burns more CO2 into the atmosphere, it increases the temperature of the earth, the ice caps melt. It seems a little bit counterintuitive, and that's just from how I look at the situation. So, in my opinion, what is needed is a little bit of careful PR sort of restructuring a little bit. What about not just stop oil, but what about just use a little less oil? Do the Martin Lewis approach. Go through a scenario which you can reduce the use of your oil or reduce the use of electricity. I mean, hey, I'll tell you what. I'll do it right now. Look, 1, 2, 3. And the only real reason why I have that light on in the first place is just it makes the room a little bit lighter, and it puts a little less strain on my desk lamp here that I use to change the lighting, because you could just, again, just adjust it through things like this or this. Now, some people again could suggest the idea of maybe a dimmer switch, which is a pretty good idea. Well, I think it's a good idea. But then some people would say, does that really solve things? I mean, does it just use the same power as before? Or is it any better than just saying a light bulb is either on or off? And again, just to give you guys a little bit of an example, again, I have all my electronics completely turned off by 10:30 at the latest. When my phone is fully charged, I just set the alarm for it and don't even charge it through the night. Just leave it, everything off. And again, it's used, and I don't even use my car on Sundays, because there's not really many things I have planned on Sundays that I literally can't get to by just walking. I can literally just walk and I'll be there. It's good exercise as well. So you would understand as well as I do that, again, you start off with the very small things, and you could, again, if you were to introduce the idea that it worked economically as well, then so much the better. And it's, again, when you come to things like this, where maybe it's the sort of thing that maybe Just Stop Oil should be considering, because you might say they may lose their unpopularity image if they portray themselves as people that made sense. But the thing is that it would lose a lot of its like, people would stop paying attention to it in the same way that not everybody pays attention to Martin Lewis. Because if everybody listened to what people like Martin Lewis did, everybody would be financially smarter and a lot more understanding about, the economics, about how the world, and not just for, again, working people, but for people who actually don't have work or who are unemployed, or like the very people that people constantly accuse people of Just Stop Oil from being unemployed. And without wanting to turn this into more of, like, again, a very class-forming debate, what I'll just say now, and hopefully Just Stop Oil will hear this out, because I can understand why. And actually, you know what? I'll summarize this whole thing through my favorite lyric in the whole world, written by the genius that is Paul Weller. The more I see, the more I know, the more I know, the less I understand. But right now, I don't know whether it's because I know more and I understand less, or do I understand more but know even less. I'm sort of a little bit in a bit of a balance between these two things, but hopefully we could sit down and like have a pretty nice grown-up conversation about this, because I think that at some point this is what it's all got to come down to, having a one-to-one conversation about exactly what needs to be done. What I think Just Stop Oil should be doing, however, is finding a way to actually have this conversation happen sooner rather than later. For the good of the planet, for those who will come after us, and for the good of the planet for those who will come after them. Thank you for listening.